this works. Is this streaming or not? Yes, it is. I don't know what to do. I thought I had to do a whole bunch of other stuff first. I guess not. One watching now. It's probably me. What's up, people? How we doing out here? Let me turn that off so we ain't hearing two of me. What's going on? The stream thing that come up to what is it? The chat. Probably ain't gonna be nobody in here, but we just trying to figure this out. We got a little more technological, philosophical. 6 likes already. What? I got bots, baby. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about these bots I got. But we're just back on here for a little bit. I'm saying, just let y'all know what's been going on in my life. See, I'm sitting in this chair, brother. My work rate has slowed down a little bit. I was working on a Franz Wagner, if that's how you say it, video. I was working on a video of him because you know what I'm saying, he's just fun, and I just wanted to talk about how fun he is as a shooty hooper. And then you know what I'm saying, my proclamations about the Wolves didn't exactly come to fruition, even though they showed that they should have won that series. But we'll talk about that at another time. We'll talk about D'Lo, all that other stuff that people want to know about the point guard situation. If y'all don't want him on your team, I say good luck. But we can have that discussion in more detail a little bit later on. What's up? Nah, we ain't talking about D'Lo today, Jacob. That requires a little more in-depth analysis. You know what I mean? People ain't really we got to get into the nuances of what happened and what people aren't seeing and stuff like that. We can't just talk about it. I mean, we could talk about it, but if you just want to go off playoff series, like, just look at what's happening to Jalen Brunson right now. Like, sometimes matchups are just, I wouldn't even say they are bad matchups necessarily, even though I think they might be a bad matchup for Brunson in particular. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes things happen over the course of the series. Coaches make decisions, and so people try to be good soldiers, and they kind of just fall into the game plan as opposed to imposing their will on things, on situations and stuff like that. So, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. We'll talk about it, like I said, later. Talk about the Wolves as a whole and what they kind of need to fix going into next season. Because if the idea is that you want to get rid of him and then get like a lower usage guy, you have to wonder whether or not Ant and Cat are going to actually let that person be who they are, like in the offense and stuff like that. Because a lot of this is just a lot of take turns basketball going on right now, and I don't know if a lower usage guy necessarily fixes that in that way that you want him to. You know what I mean? And the defense has to be replicated, and the filling in the gaps in a lot of ways that D'Lo did for that team would have to be replicated. If not in that specific player, then in another player. And if the idea is you want a guy of similar salary, are they going to be willing to take a back seat to Ant, who had like 50% of the ISOs in the playoffs? Like, it's a lot of questions you got to answer in that respect. Darius Garland is better than Sexton, brother. I don't think. Ooh, did I just peek? I don't think that's a question at this point. I think Sexton is a good player. He has to figure out that shot selection, because like although he can generate buckets and stuff, like if a lot of your a big portion of your shot diet is like mid-range twos and like long twos and floaters and stuff like that, and you ain't really putting up threes like that. You know what I mean? Like that's closer to 6-man territory than actual a starting guard on like winning basketball teams. But I think he's a good player, like, for what he does. But he has to improve the playmaking, and that shot diet has to change if he wants to be considered, like, well, not considered, but in the discussion of him and Garland, like, Garland just does things that generate winning basketball more than Sexton does at this point. And the defense is a little, got the memes of him slapping the floor and stuff like that. But, it leaves a little bit to be desired as well. So he has some things that he has to work on. We don't know how he's going to look after the injury. I think he could be, at similar levels, but it's just a wait and see thing for now. I need the chat to populate in the OBS, but it's not, so I got to look over here. Oh my goodness. I don't think either one of them is a particularly good defender at this point. Garland sometimes you're just too small, man. Like all you can have all the want to and all the desire you want to, but sometimes you're just gonna get washed out of things just by being too small. But uh, on that roster construction, like you can hide them well enough because you have Mobley and Allen there to just kind of like I would say Okoro as well, but like with his offensive limitations, I don't know if they're gonna start looking for alternatives at the wing position. I think he can still improve to where he could still be like highly valuable for them, but like you never know what they're gonna do in the future. But as far as defense, like guard defense is a little overrated in some aspects as opposed to big man defense and the fact that you can kind of scheme people out. And if you try hard enough, like nobody's gonna be like, well, I'm not gonna say nobody because we just saw. I don't know what was going on last night, but Luka was getting absolutely torched for just. I've never seen a man get hunted like that. Poole's getting hunted. Like a lot of defenses want to, and sometimes you just have a bad matchup. But for the most part, you can kind of scheme around stuff like that, especially if they're giving you a whole bunch on the offensive end. You can kind of figure out ways around these kind of things, especially with a guy like Garland who's very small. But you can also have a situation like Trey where like a lot of the reason they just gonna have problems is just because he be getting hunted all the time too. Like so, you never know. It's not enough film on that man to say one way or the other whether or not he's gonna be like a liability on that end. We're gonna get into D'Lo pretty soon. Like I said, I'm gonna have a whole separate video on it. It was gonna be on the Wolves in general, but like with this whole thing happening, I don't personally think this is as much of a discussion as people is making it. Like Stein just said that he think like people think that D'Lo's gonna be traded, and a lot of the times that's an outsider's perspective on what they saw. Like, oh, he's making all this money. He didn't play well in the playoffs, which I don't really necessarily agree with. He didn't shoot well. Like I said in the video about them making the playoffs months and months ago. Shooting well and playing well are not necessarily the same thing because he was still playmaking at a high level. The defense was still good. He had one of the best defensive ratings on the team. He had the second highest net rating on the team in general, and that was with him shooting like that. So we got to talk about his year as a whole and whether or not the things that kind of made the end of this season kind of bad are things that are going to continue because, like, even though he had probably his worst shooting year ever, what's up? Somebody just walked in. He had his worst shooting year ever, and he still was a highly impactful player. Like, he impacted winning. You about to bring something in here? All right. Okay. Well, we'll get into it, but it's not as bad as people think it is, and I don't think the problems that he had this season are going to continue. Like, if you expect him to have another terrible shooting season, then we can discuss it in that length. But like I said, we got to talk about replacements. Are they going to replace him with multiple people? Is it going to be a person of similar salary? Like, these are things that they have to kind of figure out because as currently constructed, Ant and Cat aren't going to be the main cogs of a lot of winning. Like, they can get to the playoffs and stuff like that, but if you want somebody to come in and fix it, it's a lot of gaps that they got to fill, and whether or not that's with a big and a point guard or if you want a similar guard to D'Lo who drives more and like a Brogdon who can't stay on the floor. Like, it's a lot of things you got to consider, but like I said, we'll talk about that more in depth in the actual video. Okay, so shot selection for the team. Like I said, that's an Ant Cat thing more than a D'Lo thing at this point because in those last two games, well, the last three games specifically, the shots that people had problems with, like they were mostly cat and net isos for the most part. Like game 5, I put a video on Twitter. I'll probably post it at some point, but people want to talk about that shot that D'Lo took at the end of game 5. And he airballed it. It was a terrible shot as like a functional shot. But people never considered why he took the shot. Time and score kind of necessitated that. It was 13 seconds left. And it was 13 seconds left on the game clock. It was like, or something like that. Or 16 seconds left on the game clock, 13 on the shot clock. And from what I can tell and what actually turned out to be a good decision, you kind of have to go early in that situation where you're down 1 because you want to actually have another chance if you miss the shot to have a chance to tie the game on a 3 if they make 2 free throws, which is ultimately what happened. So, like, that happened. Game 6, I actually support Finch taking him out in that juncture of the game. I don't think he played bad up until that point, but, like, J-Mac had it rolling, even though, like, the actual advanced numbers, if you look at them for that game, Like he looked like he was hooping, but the numbers are telling a different story, and they're telling a different story for D'Lo as well. Of course, you can't go off those numbers specifically, like net rating on one game. Like who does that? But like there's a little more nuance than people like to make it. He was playing good defense, stuff like that. But those two turnovers back to back were absolutely unacceptable. Like he had to go sit down. Now whether you sit him for the final 6 minutes or whatever, I don't know because J Mac wasn't allowed to run the offense after that anyway because Cat and Ant decided to dance again. Like so, it's a lot of things you got to like talk about before we like get into this whole analysis of it. But somebody just brought some food in here. I'll eat it in a minute. We could talk for a couple more minutes. Yeah, Charles. Like a lot of the stuff, like they're getting by on talent right now, and we have to talk about like what happened with Finch at the end of the season. Like what happened to the Malik Beasley was on the milk carton. The fact that they gave Pat Bev a lot more usage. Like I understand what they were going for because like Ja was absolute food on the other end, and like Pat every time he would go he would get 2 feet into paint, and like you can collapse the defense that way. But like what we saw was Pat would get there and then just nothing would happen. He would start pivoting and like he can't convert at the rim really well. So my thing was okay, you see that matchup. And there's no universe where they're going to like put Ja on D'Lo in those situations. They kind of did it at the end of game 4 and he kind of got whatever he wanted, even though he missed the shots. Like, you know, he got some looks that he was comfortable with. My thing was like, if you're going to do that, if that's going to be your strategy, if you're going to attack Ja in these situations, why is Noel sitting on the bench for the remainder of the series? He played in game 1. His defense wasn't that great in game 1, but he was still he came in for a little bit to give him a spark. He started missing after that. But like, if you're gonna attack that mismatch in that way, if you're gonna go mismatch hunting, you have to have your best mismatch hunters on the floor, which would be Cat and to a lesser extent D'Lo, depending on who the mismatch is. And then you have Noel who has shown you throughout the season he can get to the rim pretty much whenever you want to. And if he's not getting to the rim, he got the little bump floaters that he can do. Now you're gonna lose some things in playmaking and stuff like that. Maybe you thought J Mac was a better option in that situation and stuff like that. But I think Noel had to be on the floor at some point if that's what you were going with. Like if that's what the offense was gonna devolve into, especially like early in the fourth quarter when they had these leads and like the offense kind of start bogging down. Now I know he doesn't play. He didn't play, so like you don't want to just throw him into a game like that. But like I think he needed more minutes. And like some of the movement stuff that they were trying to run with Beasley wasn't really working after the second game. I saw a lot of like 2 or 3 instances where they shut it down and then it just seemed like he like disappeared. Like he was still getting shots up, but a lot of that was like in transition and stuff like that. So I gotta just look at what happened because I still haven't looked at it because like I was saying when the video started, I've been sitting in this chair. This chair is not balanced. And so y'all know my back is cooked. So I can only sit in this chair for so long, like during a day before I start having problems. I've been actually sitting on like a big yoga ball to like strengthen my hips and back. So like we're dealing with a lot of that. Let me look at this chat because I haven't looked at it in a second. Let me see. Yeah, J-Mac did give up the 3 to Tyus. A lot of people were clamoring for Tyus. He was playing well that series, but like I was gonna say with Brunson, like he doesn't look as good in this series going on now. Like a lot of this stuff is situational, so I don't want people to have knee-jerk reactions to things. I want to say Finch got exposed. I would say the Wolves roster got exposed more than Finch did, but we've known this all season. Even with D'Lo playing terribly, well, not playing terribly, shooting terribly. Let's get to playing terribly. They still had double digit leads in all these games. So like you have this thing where, yeah, at the end of games they kind of got exposed because they couldn't rebound to save their lives. They were getting stops. They just couldn't rebound. And Brandon Clark turned into Mark Price in the target center. He was shooting 80% from the free throw line in the target center. Like what? He was shooting 40% at home, or like 46% or something like that. So a lot of weird things happen as far as how that series went. So if you're Finch and you have all this evidence of these things working over 3 quarters, right? And you're building leads and you're keeping leads every time they start coming back, you kind of keep them at bay for a little bit longer. You know what I mean? The only one I think was really egregious was the one where he didn't call the timeout in game 3, which ironically was the best D'Lo game because Cat kind of had some problems. But, you know, we'll talk about that later, like I said. But yeah, so you have this thing where they've been kind of hunting mismatches throughout the game and kind of getting whatever they want for a large majority of the game. And then at the end of the game, or at the end of quarters specifically, they closed quarters poorly the entire series pretty much. And a lot of that was just like the Grizzlies kind of finagling their way into the bonus and then getting some calls that kind of changed momentum. It happened a lot in this series where like the last 2 minutes of quarters or the last 3 minutes, John and stuff would start getting to the free throw line, and then they would start getting a little momentum, and then it would just a 10-point lead would become a 4-point lead, and it just kept happening like that. But the Wolves would build it back up, then it would all fall off the rails in the fourth quarter. But they just didn't have an answer for Clark. It's just as simple as that. They didn't have an answer for Bane, even though D'Lo did some good work on him after they kind of like focused on him a little bit more, but he was still putting up like 25. Like they just were selling out the guard John. Sometimes these things just happen. Dylan Brooks had an unbelievable shooting game in Game 6. Like you don't expect that to happen too often. So a lot of things that are fixable happen, but offensively, in terms of D'Lo specifically and Malik Beasley and not using Noel, Finch got an answer for that. But I don't think Taylor Jenkins outcoached him or anything like near that. You know what I mean? So we'll talk about all that at another point. Yeah, man, the Grizz, they get a fantastic whistle. And, like, I can't even necessarily hate on it because, like, they attack a lot, which, you know, a large part of it is Josh just small. He goes to the rim and he just falls. And, like, when somebody's that small, like, what can you do? I guess something had to happen for him to fall on the ground. Like, the one call in game, I can't remember if it was game 5. I think it was game 5. Where they called Pat Bev for a blocking foul, or something like that. Somebody was trailing Ja, and somebody was outside of the painted area, like outside of the restricted area, and like Ja was on either like a fast break or like a semi-transition situation, and he like slipped and like fell into the guy that was trying to take the charge, and they gave him the call, and like it was just a lot of calls like that, a lot of ticky-tack stuff. You see Ant get murdered on one end, and Ja come down real fast, and he get like a little reach touch foul, like the clear path foul they called on D'Lo, the offensive foul they called on D'Lo. Like it was some bad calls, and I want to talk about the refs at some point as well. I think the refs nowadays have a bad time like discerning what's like actual basketball biomechanics and like how people move on the court, as opposed to like thinking of it as some like intentional action that people are doing. Like we saw that really wild call on Cat like in the Hawks game a long time ago where they called him for a flagrant foul because he did like the little Dirk fade and like kick somebody. There's a lot of weird calls like that this season where people are like doing fadeaways or things and they're calling kickouts on like natural basketball motions. I'm not saying the Cat one was, but like if you see somebody with a turnaround fadeaway like a Kobe type turnaround fade and their leg swings into somebody, they're like, oh, offensive foul because he kicked the guy, and it's like that's like how your body moves if you're trying to balance yourself for a shot. Now, I think like the refs are like struggling with that. I don't know why. I don't know if they're just sticklers for the rules or what's going on, but like it's a lot of weird stuff going on with the refereeing this season in particular. Yeah, the dunk was a charge, but as a don't call charges on dunks truther, like because we was all up in arms when they called that one on Gabe Vincent when they gave Ant the charge on Gabe Vincent, even though he was kind of late. So I see why people was mad at that. But like, you know, sometimes you just gotta let it rock. You know what I'm saying? But it was a charge, like by the letter of the law. I think it was a charge as well. And shout out to Malik Beasley for like trying to take a charge. He kind of disappeared in this series, but like he was like a professional. Like you forget that he one of the only people on this team with like playoff experience. Like he doesn't have much of it, but he's been to the playoffs with the Nuggets before. And he did a lot of good things, like in game 1, and like when he was on the court, he was generally not like like he still had his problems on defense and everything like that, but he wasn't out there like making mistakes like crazy like that. So he was like solid, like so his future is kind of tenable with this team as well, I think. So him, D'Lo, you know, we got to see what they do with Taurean Prince, Nas, because Nas did not have a great series. He did not even have a good series. He towards the end he started playing better. Like he stopped getting violated in the paint and stuff like that. So he started protecting the rim a little more. But Nas just has too many plays, and Finch talked about it, and it's been a thing all season where Nas has a lot of plays where he kind of something like bad happens for him. And like generally like that's okay. Like people are gonna make mistakes, but like he always had these mistakes where they would just lead to like absolute momentum killing things on the other end. And a lot of that is like the way he goes about things. Like a lot of his problems are like physicality on rebounds, and he'll like tap rebounds instead of grabbing them and things like that, and it just kind of leads to disastrous things on the other end. So he kind of got to get that out of his system. But they need somebody that is a more imposing presence in the paint. They need a role man very badly. A lot of the stuff that Ant and Cat have trouble with would kind of be solved if they kind of had a competent role man, because that's the read that Ant can make most consistently at this point, because he's not a good playmaker at this point in his career. He's just not. And like the one read he can make is like the little pocket pass. You see him throwing it with the left hand and stuff like that. He needs somebody that can put pressure on the rim like that. Cat can in some respects, but he pops too much. And that's a read that Ant doesn't really make consistently at this point. Like you'll see them trying to set flare screens for Ant on the perimeter. I mean for Cat on the perimeter, and Ant just not making a read and stuff like that. And he starts getting in his dancing bag when there's like Cat is just standing next to him as opposed to actively going towards the rim. So, like I said, we'll talk about all that stuff later. They got some issues they got to fix with that roster. And let's see what else we got. Said he would have pushed him. I don't know about pushing him. Let's see. Yeah, we talked about that. We're gonna talk about that. About D'Lo potentially getting traded. Like I said before you came in here, like I think that's more of a speculative thing than what the Wolves are actually thinking right now. They might be thinking that, but if they are numbers guys like they purport to be, and you take D'Lo's actual impact on the court this season, I saw the article from Jace Frederick was like he was the only one that had a negative net rating like in the second half of the season. It was like it was like negative 0.4, and like the next closest person to him was Anthony Edwards. And like it was just only thing that happened was the defense. If we're talking about his offensive impact, again we'll get into this to the video. I think his offensive rating was like 118.5. The defense fell off stupendously, but everybody's did. Everybody stopped playing defense on that team generally like the last 20 games of the season or so. And in the playoffs, he had like the third or fourth best defensive rating on the team. So like when it was time to lock in, he locked in. So like if we're doing these kind of gotcha games with the net rating and stuff like that, like it's a lot more to it than what people are trying to act right now. But I don't think they're in any immediate rush to like get rid of him, if that's the thing. Especially if him and Cat is boys like they say they boys. I don't think it's gonna be nothing like that unless there's some things we don't know about right now. But if they're numbers guys like they purport to be, his impact on the team this year was crazy until the second half, which he still was third on the team in net rating. And that was in a super down shooting year. Like in my video before the season, I talked about how he was one of the best catch and shoot guys in the league. Like in the past, like he was like 40% for like almost 3 years straight before last year. Before this recent year, where he was like 33% or something crazy. I don't expect that to continue. If it does, then we can have a conversation about it. But for now, a lot of people had down shooting years. Steph was shooting terribly in catch and shoot situations. So like, there's some things that people got to figure out. We don't know if it's the basketball. We don't know what it is. But like, the shooting was down. And if it continues to be down, then I'll think it'll be a discussion. But until then, I don't think you need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, man. Especially in one of the most successful seasons this franchise has ever had. Like, I think that would be crazy. Let's see. I don't think that's true about him not feeding Cat. Max? I don't think that's true at all. I think part of the reason that D'Lo isn't able to get off is because he's looking for Cat too much. The way that D'Lo likes to hunt mismatches for Cat is he likes to get the ball to Cat in spots where he can actually like do something with it. And a lot of that is you see a lot of the mismatch hunting where they kind of running switches and things like that, and he's trying to get him the ball. Even in game, game 3, where everything was falling apart and D'Lo came back in the game, one of the first things he did was ran that little wing switch where he would give Cat the ball at the top of the key. This idea that D'Lo doesn't give Cat the ball is wild, because he had over 130 assists to him, like, which is by far the most on the team. Like, and he doesn't even play the majority of his minutes like that with Cat. But he plays a lot of minutes without him. You know what I mean? And so, one thing D'Lo's gonna do is he's gonna let the teammates do what they're gonna do. And Cat, he'll let them do whatever they want for the most part. Like this idea, he might not run the offense as fast as people like, which is another discussion of him directing traffic and trying to tell people where to go before things actually start materializing. But this idea that he doesn't give Cat the ball is not one that's based on any reality, really. It might look a certain way to people if they see a shot that he takes with seconds left on the shot clock and things like that, but his number one priority is always giving Cat the ball. Like, him and Cat had a great net rating this series. Offensively, like, I think they were like a plus 12 or something like that. I have to look it up. But, like, the dynamic of of Cat and D'Lo is not the problem. The fit of all three of them is more questionable than, like, a Ant and D'Lo fit or a Cat and D'Lo fit than a D'Lo and Cat fit just, like, being a problem. Like, how all three of them fit together, I don't think it's necessarily a problem either in that respect, but it's more of a problem than the two man units. I think the Cat and Ant one is the one that is most questionable, and that's not a talent thing. That's a thing where they both kind of make mistakes because they're trying to force their talent on the game as opposed to actually reading game situations. I just picked up a fork. I got food over here. I got to get to it, but like I said, we'll talk about all that stuff later. His early contested threes, if they're in transition, he does it a lot. But even in that series, he didn't even have an opportunity to really take those threes because they were sitting on. He didn't get any of the coverages that allow him to get into his pull-up bag like that anyway. So if you don't like the ones in transition, I understand that. Even though the season before that was pretty much an automatic shot for him. So, like, you know what I mean? It's a question of if it's a make or miss thing, and, like, you know, but he didn't really shoot. Like, I've watched a lot of D'Angelo Russell basketball. He was more measured in his shot selection this year than any year, like, ever. Like by far. He didn't really take that many awful shots this year. And the ones he took on other rosters is because those rosters were terrible. Like, he really reined in his game this year. I don't think people are applauding him enough for that. And he played the best basketball of his career numbers-wise, while kind of just not even being the guy he was. We got to talk about, like, the off-ball stuff and, like, how they used him in the second half of the season and stuff like that. But like I said, we'll get to that when we get to it. Yeah, man. Cat in the double teams. Like, if y'all watch my video about his passing, I mentioned this all before the season. Cat just I don't understand why he can't commit certain things to memory. I don't know, like I always joke, like, you got to sacrifice some things, like, or you can't have somebody be too perfect. Like, LeBron stinks at the free throw line, and his jumper was terrible for a long time before he became an actual, you know what I'm saying, good shooter. And I think Cat's problem is those big feet don't allow him to do certain things, and then, like, he just doesn't think sometimes. Like, all of his problems with double teams are easily fixable if he would just not hold the ball. Like, and it's not even him holding the ball, it's the way he holds the ball. In the video I mentioned, he likes to palm the ball to do things. So every time he has the ball like this and he's just surveying the court and he's just letting people get into his space, and by the time he actually can make a decision, he can't go anywhere because it's too late to do anything. And he still does that way too often. Like, you can't do that. Like, I think it was game 3. I think Richard Jefferson was like, hey, man, you know what I'm saying? If Cat would just do an escape dribble, all you got to do is dribble backwards and kind of loosen that up, and some lanes will open up. But he never does it. When he said that, I'm like, bro, I said that in October. Like, he's at this point, he's probably never going to do it. I think Cat had a good defensive series for what it's worth, though. Like, he was protecting the rim really well. They still can't really run drop with him consistently because, like, he still get a little handsy when, like, people get in this space coming off of picks and stuff like that. But, like, I think he had a pretty good defensive series. So the question is, how sustainable is that defense? Because they start mixing in coverages. I don't know if that was to, like, I don't know if that was to preserve people for the playoffs, or if they just kind of wanted to see what else they had. But the defense kind of slipped when they kind of start switching into other coverages and stuff like that. So we got to look into that and see why that all happened. I saw something about Pat Bev hitting the oh yeah, that 3 was pretty bad. The 3 was bad. I think that shot he took before that was worse, though, the when they ran a little fake handoff action and he just turned off into that long two. Like, of course it's a shot he can make, but it was like 16 seconds left on the clock, and like it was a long two, so like you don't even get the benefit of the space he had. Like, that was just not a great shot. He took some questionable shots. D'Lo passed him the ball, and he took like a 18-foot floater with like he just doesn't take good shots sometimes. But like, he's so talented, like you got to live with him because he'll make them, more often than another person will. But like, a lot of the things that we like to ascribe to D'Lo with bad decision making, like in the half court, they're more noticeable because there are things where he's trying to make a play. So like that turnover on the overplay that Bane had, where he tried to bounce the ball to Carl, that was a turnover that Bane ended up stealing. Like, of course, like you're like, oh, D'Lo, don't make that pass in that situation. But then you go back a couple years in the playoffs in the game 4 against the Sixers, in a way more high leverage situation, same pass, same play, basically. It wasn't the same play, but same thing happened. He makes the same pass to Joe Harris. Joe Harris lays it up for a bucket to take the lead with like 28 seconds left. So like, it was a mistake. Like, you don't want people to take those kind of risks mostly, but like, that's the thing where he saw it work before. And if you read somebody overplaying, a back cut is usually what you're going to do. He threw a bounce pass, it didn't get there. He got taken out. He should have got taken out because that was the second turnover in like 80 seconds. But like, that's a loud turnover. But the shots that can and shoot are just as egregious a lot of the times. Like, just their shot selection is just not good a lot of the times. And those are, I'm not going to say they're as bad as turnovers, but if they're making decisions like that, you know what I'm saying? Like, so people don't talk about that as much as the turnovers because they're not as noticeable. But like, taking an 18-foot floater with 10 seconds left on the clock is not a good shot, no matter how you slice it. So like, we're going to get into that. I saw something about Pat Bev. I kind of wanted to get into Pat Bev, but like I said, I got stuff to eat. But I'll just say this about Pat Bev. Pat Bev is the reason why they kind of struggled, like, down the stretch. I think he's more of a culprit than anybody in that respect. And not necessarily because of anything he did. He's just not a threat in that way. Like, he started trying to impose himself. I think going forward, okay, I'll say it like this. Pat Bev is a problem only because Vando was also in the lineup with him a lot of the times, right? So Pat Bev, he was a good shooter before this season. He only shot like 34% for three. So like, his offensive utility went down this season. And they kind of tried to, I don't know if he realized that his shooting wasn't as good, and he was in the starting lineup with Vando, and he just made a decision like, hey, I kind of have to impose myself to be a threat out here because me and Vando can't both be negatives on the court out here. And so he kind of got into his bag that way. I don't know, but if him and Vando are both on the team next year, I don't think they both can start. If D'Lo's also here as well, I don't think they both can start because Ant already doesn't go to the rim enough. Vando is not a consistent role threat because he can't catch the ball. Like, he can roll, but he can't catch the ball well enough to be like a consistent threat in that way. And then Pat, he can generate some penetration, but it's not going to lead to anything really positive for the most part. And so you have this weird, clunky offensive fit that it can work for the most part because they still had like the best offense in the league. But when it really comes down to like bucket getting time, like, it becomes a problem when you have those guys on the court together. Even though Vando isn't out there a lot of the times, Pat's presence with Ant and Cat as well kind of makes it a problem. He was out there with J-Mac. J-Mac wasn't getting the ball. Pat was just, just out there, especially when he wasn't really guarding Ja a lot of the times. Like, so you kind of have to like juggle these things and kind of figure out how that's going to work. But going forward, I don't think he should start if they can get like another wing, or if Jaden is ready. If Jaden is ready, I don't think Pat should start anymore. But how do you finagle that with the amount of money you're paying him and his perceived importance to the team, whether it be himself or if the coaching staff thinks he's that important? You have to kind of figure out how that works. Yeah, man. Jaden, I think the season really started falling off the rails when Jaden got hurt. Like, I think he needs to start. He has to start next season, particularly. But Jaden has a little bit of that wild streak in him too, where like his decision making kind of is questionable sometimes. Like people like to talk about Jaden. Jaden is the wildest boy I ever seen. He came in that rookie year. He was trying to dunk on everybody. He tried to dunk on somebody like 4 times in one game. Got murdered at the rim every time. I don't remember if it was the Phoenix game. I don't remember what it was, but he tried to dunk on somebody like 4 times and got absolutely destroyed every time. And he just kept going for it. Like so, Jaden has a little bit of a streak in him where he'll do something and he'll just keep trying it until it works. And like you got to kind of respect it because he got a little bit of dog in him, but like you got to kind of rein him in. So like with the way that Cat and Ant already operate on offense, and like Jaden gets in where he fits in, he's really he. I was telling people like I don't think he probably has, but you know like my thing was like once the opponent's lead gets to like 7, 8, or 9, Jaden gonna hit a shot to like make sure it don't spill over into like a 10-point lead. He did it like all season. It was just a timely thing that he kept doing. That dude, I would want that dude on my team. Like he about it. And I think he's ready to start. We got to see what Balmero has, or Balmaro, however you want to say it. I don't know how to say it. But like they have pieces on this roster that if they can like develop them properly, then it'll solve this Pat Bev problems. Like, you know, we got to see what Wright has. I don't know if they're going to really use him, but like ideally he's probably like a Pat Bev replacement, somebody that can defend and like kind of initiate offense. He can't shoot to save his life. Well, he couldn't. So like I see what they're kind of trying to do on this roster, but we got, like I said, I don't know what this roster is going to look like next year for the most part. But if Pat is there and it's kind of the same kind of vibe, I don't know if he should start anymore. You know what I mean? Let's see. Has D'Lo ever been a threat at the rim? Yes and no. So one of the things about that net season that had him really cooking is that he was able to get into his floater game a little bit, which he hasn't really done since then. He kind of goes in and out of it, but he was with like Jared Allen set picks for him. He can get to he can get in the paint and like kind of make things happen in that way. Even in this season when Ant wasn't really playing well and they kind of found something with him and Vando and like the pick and roll, like he can get there when he needs to. He doesn't do it as much as you would like, of course. But like a lot of this stuff, like I said earlier about Cat and Ant fit, a lot of this stuff will be solved if they have somebody that can actually screen and roll. Because like Cat doesn't set enough picks. He doesn't set good enough picks is what I mean to say. Like Cat screens like somebody that's screening to get the ball. And like that's not the kind of screen you want. Like you have to screen to free somebody up. He screens like a guy who has screened his whole life and was expecting the ball to come back to him. Like I don't know if I talked about this like a long time ago in the Julius Randle video, but that's the kind of screens he used to say, where it's like you're just kind of getting in the way of the person that you're kind of supposed to be screening so the ball can come back to you. So Cat has to set better screens. He has to be a better roller. But I don't know if you want Cat to even really do that as much with the shooting he has. So they need somebody that's able to actually screen well enough to kind of free D'Lo up. Of course, you don't want him to be wholly dependent on like somebody screening for him. So like that's another discussion. But I think he can get there good enough in the actual offense with a screener to like get into his floater bag and stuff like that. He's not going to finish at the rim well, like on higher volume, he's not. If he's going at a certain rate, he can give you like 60% at the rim, stuff like that. But like he just doesn't have the athletic pop to like be a consistent like good finisher. But a lot of that was overcome with his actual talent, like in the floater range. Like he had a lot of touch there, and he did a lot of good things there. He had ball fakes that would like kind of disorient people so he can get up clean looks and stuff like that. Like he did some really good work in the paint that year, and it never really materialized after that. Golden State, they kind of had some things where he would, do that, but he was shooting so good that it didn't really matter. But like I said, the problem with D'Lo this year was that he could not convert on catch and shoot for like the entire year. That was the main offensive problem he had, and he still was almost a 20-7 guy for most of the year until like towards the end where his scoring kind of fell off, where he went from 19 to 18. So they got some things they still got to fix on his roster. He could be a little better getting to the rim, but I think that if they just get a consistent screen guy, like he'll be able to do some more of that stuff. That's another thing you asked about, why he doesn't lean into the pick and roll game as much. A lot of coaches have philosophies where they want to actually be able to run sets that, don't rely on pick and roll as much because like when you actually want to get to it in high leverage situations, you don't want as much like film on it for like lack of a better way to explain it. But like you want to have sets that you can go to and stuff like that. And I think that's a problem with their offense. Even though like I said they had the best offense in the league, a lot of their problems come down to they don't have the personnel for the kind of offense they want to run. Even though it worked, like in the high leverage situations, it didn't work as well. And part of that is because they don't have the actual execution to do it how you want them to do it. So they have to kind of, I don't know if they address that by just internal development because their two best players, Cat and Ant, they still too cavalier for that offense at this point in their career, especially Ant as far as making quick decisions. Cat can make the decisions, but he holds on to the ball too much and he's a little too patient. Well, patient, I don't know if that's the right word, but he's a little too tentative and like keeping the ball moving and stuff like that. And D'Lo, even though he's more deliberate, he's gonna like give you the ball like on time and on target and stuff like that. So they kind of have this thing where maybe the guy running the show is a little less pace than you would want, but he knows the entire system and he's gonna make sure that everybody's in their spots before they actually run it, which causes a little bit of delays. And then you throw a ball to either Cat or Ant in some kind of swing situation or some situation where they have to kind of make a quicker decision than they'd be making. And Ant he's dancing with the ball and he's not really reading the off-ball screens and stuff like that. Or Cat's just letting people double team him or he's not getting good position to actually run the sets that they're trying to run. So it's a lot of things that they kind of have to consider with the personnel that they have and whether or not they want to just lean into more talent-based stuff like more pick and rolls. But again, if you want to run pick and roll, you got to have somebody that can actually roll as opposed to just popping all the time. And whether or not that's a conscious decision made by Cat or if that's a scheme decision that the coaches made, we don't know. But it's unless they get actual threats, like because if Nate Knight could actually jump high enough, he would be kind of like okay because he knows how to set a screen, turn his body and like sit in that window where you need to sit in so you can actually be a threat to catch the ball and finish. But then he get to the rim and the bunnies just disappear half the time. So like they need a guy like Nate Knight, but it probably can't be Nate himself unless he gets more athletic and more explosive. Yeah, I say they need to run more set. They had some set stuff that worked. The wild thing about Game 6 was like I think I thought that they were going to run more set stuff for D'Lo based on what they did at the end of last year, and like I think we're seeing that's another reason why Pat probably can't play in the starting lineup because when J-Mac gets in there, then D'Lo's a little more free to do off ball things, and I think a lot of the stuff we saw last season was a result of like Ricky being there, and I'm not saying like it has to be Ricky, but it needs to be somebody that kind of can make those decisions to where they can run more set actions and stuff they can run more free flowing stuff if you have another decision maker. Like I don't think they have enough guards that are decision makers in the starting lineup to run the kind of offense they want to run. So they need either a ball handling wing they can trust to do that, or Ant has to get better at that, and that's where you have to start because they don't have enough playmakers to run the offense that they're trying to run. They need one more ball handler that actually can make decisions. So until that happens, I agree they need to run a little more sets. They ran sets, but they ran them mostly for like Malik. You know what I mean? And like I don't think the team has the collective IQ to kind of do what they want. Like it can work if you have the right personnel for it. And the only guy that they kind of have that can really do it consistently is like J-Mac and D'Lo at this point. I don't know. I don't know if I'm necessarily looking for anything right now. I haven't really looked at it yet. I don't know who would fit like the kind of guy they need because like you kind of want to say like oh they need like a Rashawn Holmes type, but like I don't know how many of those there are, and you can't get Rashawn himself because he has his own problems with the law. Like so, I'll think about that and get back to it. But like they need to at least like I said get somebody that's a physical presence inside. I don't. I'm not saying they should give up on Nas, but I don't know if Nas is going to be that much longer on this team if they want to like take that next step. And I love Nas. I think like I really like his development. I really like what he's done as far as getting his body in order and like getting his athleticism, his explosiveness right, but he has some glaring inconsistencies in his game, down from his physicality in the paint, all the way to like his ability to finish at the rim and like shoot the ball, which are like his two best traits. Like last year, he changed his jumper like 4 times, and his shot form like is kind of weird. Like it's more of like a slingshotty type of thing. So like it doesn't look like it's ever going to be consistent because of the way it is. Like it's too much velocity, like in his release and stuff like that. And he shoots from a weird set point, and he kind of has to have his like tiptoes like right to like. So like there's a lot of things that he still has to like theoretically Nas is like a good basketball player, but like he just has too many things that creep up too often to like rely on him. And so like I know the idea is like you want somebody that is kind of a facsimile of Cat to like run your offense and stuff like that, but they need a guy who can set screens, roll hard, and fight on those boards more than anything else on this roster. And I don't know if Nas can give you that. And I love that dude, but he probably gonna have to find it somewhere else if they want to like take the next step. Ant playing with the second unit is kind of a double-edged sword because like you want him to develop, like you said, his playmaking chops and things like that. But if I think you have to kind of mandate that he do that, because if you leave Ant to his own devices, and I can't blame him for being this way, because like if you have the first step that he has and you have the confidence in your jumper that he has, like you have the ball, you are probably the best mismatch on the court. And like I said a long time ago, we'll talk about like playmaking and how like most of that is just hunting mismatches and things like that. And so you have to kind of deprogram Ant to like go against his baser instincts and be like, I'm gonna cook this dude that's in front of me, and kind of make him be that playmaker. And that goes into a lot of things I just said about Nas. You have to have somebody on that second unit that's actually a partner with him in that way, because if the other guy that's on the court with him is like Jalen, like it might devolve into some Jalen Noel, it might devolve into some like take turns kind of offense. So like you kind of have to have somebody that's gonna either hold him accountable in that way, either on the coaching staff or whatever, or you have to have somebody that's gonna make him realize that playmaking is a good idea with the second unit. Otherwise, you might end up reinforcing bad habits. So, like, I think it would be a good idea, but it all depends on who they bring in and what kind of directives they give him. And if they tell him, like, we want you to go out here and we want you to be a table setter as opposed to, like, the six man of the year microwave type of offense that you might get into in those kind of situations, you kind of have to, like, find that balance. And I don't know how they'll do that, but that's a way they could do it, but I don't know. But again, like I said, D'Lo lets them do whatever they want in the starting unit, so you can kind of do that in the starting unit. If anybody you want him to develop that alongside of, it would be D'Lo, because he can play off the ball, and he doesn't have any qualms about giving either one of them the ball, and kind of to his own detriment sometimes. And he did that. This is why a lot of his teams were like god awful. He would just let people do things like that shouldn't have done, like letting Glenn Robinson III do whatever you want to do. Omari Spellman, like. One thing about D'Lo, like he has his reputation of being like this chucker and this guy who doesn't like to share. He lets guys do whatever they want, like for the most part. Like if it gets to the fourth quarter and it's like time for somebody to take a shot, of course he's going to want to take that shot. But throughout the course of a game, he's going to let you get off whatever you want to get off if he trusts you enough to do it. So like, you know, you can kind of develop that with him, D'Lo, and Cat. But again, Cat probably doesn't do enough to actually help him hone those skills as a roller and stuff like that. And then he kind of still devolves into his own baser instincts, because like the floor looks different when Cat is out there. Like the paint might not be as congested and stuff like that, and he sees an opportunity to kind of dance on somebody. So like there's a lot of moving parts to all of this stuff that you kind of have to look at. Short answer, I think it could be a good idea, but with some caveats. I don't know. I haven't heard about the D'Lo Pelicans trade rumors. I don't know. I think if they could do that, like if the Pelicans could get D'Angelo Russell on that team, like I think you do that 30 times out of 22, brother. Like, but I don't know, because like we see with CJ, great player, But like he has some limitations that I don't know if him and D'Lo can play beside each other because it becomes a CJ Dame thing again. But like Brandon showed that he could be a defender and things like that. We don't know what Zion will look like, and we don't know if Jonas is the big. And like there's a lot of moving parts there as well. But like if you're just getting D'Lo back, I think you should. I think if you're the Pelicans, you do that personally. But I'm the most pro D'Lo guy you're gonna find because like I've watched him enough to know a lot of the stuff that people watch and people see. They don't they don't have the actual context and like just the kind of feel for who he is. Like when he took that shot in Game 5, and people are like, oh my God, why is he taking that shot? It's like you couldn't have been watching the Wolves all year if you're asking that question, even though he airballed the shot. Like he's been doing it all season. Like so, like, but I don't know. I have to look more into that. But I think the Pelicans got a little something cooking, boy. That Herbert Jones feller, like that guy a lot. I think they got a lot of good stuff cooking over there, and I don't think adding that guy would be a bad thing. But what are you giving up to get him? I don't know. Who am I rooting for in the playoffs now? I don't know. I don't have because like I said, I don't know if y'all remember, but I'm technically a Lakers fan, even though they played some god awful basketball this year, and I was not about to subject myself to that basketball, especially if like my thing is, I'm a process guy over like a results guy as far as like what I'm a fan of when I watch basketball, and people think I'm crazy when I tell them this all the time. The only reason I want my team to be successful and like it's not to like be able to lord how many championships my franchise has over the other franchise, right? It's nothing like that. So like I don't care when the Celtics play or if they're playing well. Like all of the rivalry stuff that people get into, I don't really care about that stuff unless it's like in the playoffs. It makes it more fun. But like I don't care if they're the number one team in the East and they win. Like I don't really care about all that stuff too much. The only reason I want my team to win is because it means I get to see them play for as long as possible. That's all that matters. Like my Niners went to the Super Bowl and they lost in that heartbreaking fashion. I was over that in like 3 hours because like I got to see them in the final game of the season. That's all. I just want to see them play. And like when I say I'm a development guy or a results guy, I like to see good process, and I like to see like one of my favorite things to do is like see people improve. Like this is why the Nas stuff is killing me because like he just shows so much improvement, but then he just kind of hit this wall, and it's like, come on, bro, like. You gotta be better than this, bro. Like I know you could be better than this, and so like I get my enjoyment out of basketball from that perspective. Like of course the wins are great, but like if somebody that you've been rooting for to like get better is actually contributing to those wins, it's way funner than like the Lakers going out and getting 17 free agents and like cobbling this team together and like trying to win a championship. Like the most fun I had this season was watching Malik Monk and Austin Reeves like kind of just hoop like when they got a chance to. You know what I mean? Like that was the best part of the season for me. So like it wasn't enough of that going on. So in terms of like playoffs, I like the Suns. Like I want to see them see if they can get back and overcome what happened last season. I'm not as much. I don't like you would think from what I just said it would be like a Grizzlies thing, and I will want to see them do well, but like I don't, I'm kind of conflicted because like I don't think they should have been in this round in the first place. But that's another discussion for another day. So to answer your question, probably I'm a fan of the Suns. I'm a fan of the Bucks, and I'm interested in like a Bucks Heat matchup and stuff like that. But I'm not having anybody I'm specifically rooting for or anything like that. I'm just an enjoyer of basketball above everything else. But I like the Suns, the way the Suns play a lot. More than probably anybody, and I'm a Giannis fan, so I want to see if he can just reach that level that he reached last year and stuff like that. I see the vision on the Turner and Brogdon trade, but like one thing Brogdon does that D'Lo doesn't do. Let me see if this camera is he's gonna give you a little more consistent penetration. But I think that we've seen over the years, this salmon cold as ever. But I think what we've seen over the years is that that shooting that he showed you in Milwaukee is probably not who he actually is as a shooter. Ooh, my knee. So I think you're going to lose a little bit of gravity in that sense. I also don't think he's as good of a playmaker as D'Lo. Of course, like the driving kick stuff is a thing, but like from a whole offense like perspective, I don't think there's too many people who are actually better playmakers than D'Lo, despite what everybody says. Also, you have to manage him from an injury perspective. Like D'Lo misses a lot of games, but Brogdon has significant time missed in pretty much like every season he's played. And so like if you're making that trade, you kind of have to have that in the back of your mind. Like, is he actually going to be able to stay on the floor? And when he does get on the floor, how's the fit going to be next to Ant and Cat when he's not exactly the gravity guy that D'Lo is and stuff like that? I think he would be a great fit ideally, but like we don't live in an ideal world, you know. So like there are many things that are positive for that, and there are many things that go wrong. Same thing with Turner. One, he has to stay on the floor. Two, I don't know exactly what the motivation for the, well, I know what it is now, but like before the season when they were trying to trade him stuff, I didn't understand what the motivation was to like try to get rid of him as opposed to like Sabonis, like because he's been in these trade rumors for like 3 years at this point. So like, is it a personal thing where he kind of wants to have a bigger role, or like what is his actual issue, either with the franchise or what is the franchise's issue with him? Is there some medical things we don't know about? Do they just think he's not good enough? And so like you have to incorporate that into your team as well. Like it's him and Cat gonna clash over some things, like not personally, but like on the floor, does Miles want a bigger role, and that's why he wants to leave? Like you kind of have to consider those things as well. I think him and Cat could actually fit together pretty okay on the court. I think Cat functionally is a four for the most part the way he plays, but I'm interested to see how that will work in practice, especially if he's going to get some more dynamic fours, because his attention to detail sometimes is not where you need it to be. And so if he's more on the perimeter and like being more of a four and kind of dealing with those guys, like matchup dependency will kind of dictate whether or not that actually works over the long term. I think it can, but we will have to see. Like you won't know until you really try. Started following because I was a Lakers fan. Well, actually, I was a fan of D'Lo in college. Like I'm from Ohio, so I live in Ohio still. But like a lot of the Ohio State games came on TV and stuff like that, and so I would just watch the games. I'm like, this dude is incredible. So like that's where the fandom kind of started. And as a Lakers fan, like you know they had the second pick, and we were on like what's called LakersGround.com on the forums, and you know I was just like hoping they would take him, and like we were just having discussions about him and stuff like that. Then when he actually got to LA. Like, he's had the weirdest career from a perspective of, like, people just not liking this dude. Like, as soon as he stepped foot in the league, like, a lot of that was, like, Byron and, like, oh, people wanted Okafor and stuff like that. But he just had this weird online presence where a lot of people just didn't like him, right? And one thing I don't like as far as, like, from a fan perspective, like, if you don't like somebody, that's fine. If you don't like the way they play, if you don't like, cool. But one thing I don't like is when people, like, lie about what they're seeing on the floor. Like, just like, if you can be wrong about it, like, but people just be lying a lot of the time about stuff that I know they're not watching. So narratives start and things like that. So my kind of like sticking with him through all of this stuff was coming from like me just defending bad faith arguments on Lakers ground. Like, it's the same thing with Julius Randle. Like, a lot of just bad faith talk about his game and stuff like that, and you get to defending this guy because, like, you're like, that's not what's happening on the court. That's not what's going on. Like, you know what I'm saying? And stuff like that. So that's kind of like why I've kind of been, like, the quote-unquote defender and all this stuff, because, like, I just want people to tell the truth about what's going on the court more than anything. And he's a guy that a lot of narratives that are not true, like, revolve around and stuff like that. So that's why I'm more vocal about it. And as far as, like, just being a fan, like, I just like the way the dude plays. Like, of course he doesn't get to the rim and stuff like that, but I don't think there's too many more people that are more dynamic than him as a basketball player, like, in terms of, like, actual things they can do on the court, as far as, like, how they can affect teams in different ways and stuff like that. Like, even we saw him shooting terribly. He wasn't even really playing point guard for most of that series, and he still found a way to impact in the metrics, like winning, even though he wasn't playing particularly well or shooting particularly well and stuff like that. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that he can do and add value to a lot of franchises or whatever you want to say, just by just, you know what I'm saying, fitting in different ways. And just the passing, like I told y'all before, I'm a passing guy before everything. Well, not before everything, but like that's the thing I'm most drawn to on the basketball floor. And just not too many people doing it like that, dude. So like that's the long and short of it. But I've been on here way too long. I gotta eat. I wasn't even supposed to be on here this long. I was really coming on here to tell y'all that some of this stuff might take a little longer. I'm about to actually get out of this chair and go sit back on my ball because my back is cooked from sitting in this chair. I got to get a new chair. We had to get some other things around the house, so I couldn't really get around to it. But stuff is going to be coming. It might be a little more delayed than usual. But like I said, I was working on a Franz Wagner video. That'll be coming soon. We're going to, of course, talk about the D-Lo stuff and the Wolves stuff first and give a little more context and everything like that. Other than that, I'm about to go eat. Hopefully this recording stops when I try to stop it. And yeah, I'll see y'all. Hopefully sooner rather than later. Got my mic arm boom. It's really broken. It's probably going to fall as soon as I move it. But I'll see y'all.